Hello, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another video. You probably already know that both Plato and Aristotle were great ancient Greek philosophers. Plato's greatness is based on his influence as a founder of Western philosophy, with his ideas shaping many fields of philosophy. His influence is so profound that the famous English philosopher Alfred North Whitehead once said, "The European philosophical tradition is only a series of footnotes to Plato." Aristotle was not only a great philosopher, but he also made foundational contributions to nearly every field of knowledge, such as logic, ethics, politics, and science. You probably also know that Plato was the teacher of Aristotle, just as you know that Socrates was the teacher of Plato. But did you know that Plato and Aristotle actually had quite different philosophical outlooks? Well, in today's video, I'm going to make a brief comparison between the two great philosophers. First of all, in my opinion, their different philosophical outlooks had a lot to do with their different backgrounds and interests. Plato had been a poet before he met Socrates and got fascinated by his philosophy and decided to study philosophy with him. Being a poet originally, Plato was creative and imaginative in his philosophical thinking, often letting his thoughts fly into the skies until he couldn't get them back. On the other hand, Aristotle's background was a science, which of course was not exactly the same science as we understand it nowadays. Modern science relies heavily on mathematical and experimental methods, while Aristotle's approach was more focused on observation and logic. Aristotle's traditional medical parents taught him the importance of hands-on experience. As a scientist, Aristotle was down to earth in his philosophical thinking, carefully observing everything around him before expressing his philosophical opinions. We can probably use an analogy to describe their different backgrounds. When Plato was sitting on the clouds and lost in thinking, Aristotle was lying on the ground, observing nature and pondering how nature worked. Interestingly, the differences between Plato and Aristotle always reminds me of the differences between the two very famous Chinese poets, Li Bai and Du Fu, both of whom are considered the two greatest poets of the Tang Dynasty. Li was a romantic poet known for his imaginative and carefree verse, influenced by Taoism and oftentimes also influenced by liquor, while Du Fu was a realist poet known for his serious, compassionate, and socially conscious works, reflecting his Confucian values and the struggles of his time. Plato and Li Bai were similar in the sense that both were idealistic in their world outlook. Aristotle shared a lot with Du Fu in the sense that both were realistic and down to earth. Different backgrounds made Plato and Aristotle develop different intellectual viewpoints. Plato was idealistic, away from the realistic world. Plato taught his students that being a lover of wisdom was the highest form of life. According to him, lovers of wisdom, or philosophers as the ancient Greeks would call them, were the elites of the world, who should rule everyone else. For Plato, the best path to wisdom, or the best way to become a philosopher, was rational contemplation, not through the daily routine done by ordinary people. To use an analogy by Plato, most of us live in the cave of ignorance and only see our shadows on the wall and mistake them as the reality. The only way to crawl out of the cave is through reason. Aristotle, however, did not agree with Plato on the argument of crawling out of the cave through reason. For Aristotle, ignorance was indeed a problem, but true knowledge was not acquired merely through reason. Instead, it was through a combination of sensory perception and rational thought. Observation and learning from experience should be our way to crawl out of the cave of ignorance. In addition, their different philosophical perspectives led them to focus their attention on different aspects of the world. The way they asked the questions, for example, revealed their differences because Plato and Aristotle phrased their questions in different ways due to their different focuses. When Plato asked why something existed at all, Aristotle would ask how it worked. When Plato asked the people what they wanted their world to be, Aristotle would ask how they could fit into the world that already existed. To illustrate this point, imagine yourself waking up one morning and seeing both Plato and Aristotle standing beside your bed. Plato would ask you, "What was your dream?" But Aristotle would say, "Get up and smell the coffee." Did you see the differences here? One was interested in your thought, and the other more interested in how you can adjust yourself and enjoy the real world. Furthermore, Plato and Aristotle had different ideas about happiness. It is true that both of them agreed that the central issue of ethics was how to achieve happiness. But Plato saw happiness as an internal, virtuous state of soul, achievable through wisdom and justice. He believed that happiness, nature, beauty, and society were all interconnected and each served a purpose. For Plato, you would be happy if you possess those virtues such as courage, wisdom, and self-discipline. Plato saw happiness as entirely internal and not dependent on external factors such as wealth, fame, or pleasure. Aristotle agreed that the purpose and ultimate goal in life is to achieve happiness. But for Aristotle, happiness is not a state of being, but rather an activity. Happiness is achieved not merely by virtues, but also through external goods such as health, wealth, and friends. It is good to have lots of money to buy things to make you happy. However, what is the point of having a lot of money to buy things when you don't have a good health to enjoy them? You wouldn't enjoy a bottle of good wine so much when you drink it alone without friends to keep you company. Therefore, happiness is achieved only when you have external material possessions, according to Aristotle. Their different perspectives on ethics is also noteworthy. For Plato, virtue was knowledge. All immoral actions are the result of ignorance. In his opinion, if people truly knew the good, they would not act wrongly. However, Aristotle saw virtue as a habit. It was a habit that was developed through practice and action. To take a morally correct action, you need practical wisdom, which is the ability to apply general knowledge to specific real-world situation, because ethics is based on the practical, observable realities of human experience and the natural world. Finally, Plato and Aristotle also differed in their opinions about politics. Plato divided people into three classes: philosophers, warriors, and producers. For Plato, only philosophers could be rulers because only they possessed the wisdom and impartiality which was needed to run a government. In his opinion, an ideal society was one in which there was no private property and there was even no family, which had been eliminated for social unity. On the other hand, Aristotle would not so easily divide people into different classes. In his opinion, all human beings were political animals, meaning that people naturally form political communities. In such a community, Aristotle preferred the best laws over the best individuals. Only the best laws could guarantee the flourishing of human beings in a community, not rulers. This is because, according to him, individuals possessed flaws and could use government to advance their own individual interests. Aristotle also focused on practical governance based on real-world observation. A mixed government that was not dominated by any class was his favorite form of governance. In conclusion, Plato was an idealist who believed true reality existed in a world of perfect abstract ideas, and the physical world was a mere shadow. In contrast, Aristotle was a realist who grounded his philosophy in the observable physical world, believing ideas and matter were inseparable and that knowledge came from both experience and reason. To use modern terminology, Plato was the spokesman for all believers in nature and all poets and artists who create things out of imagination. Aristotle, on the other hand, was the representative of all those who believe in pragmatic thinking and hands-on experience. You may also say that the history of Western philosophical thinking was the struggle between these two great philosophers, the spiritual and the creative versus the material and logical. Well, I think that is all that I wanted to talk about in today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.